once you do that, we'll go through the agenda item by item.
Warden Marriott looks ideally suited for this.
Oh, I thought you were going to give me a break, Mike. I thought you were going to let somebody, I thought it'd be good training for somebody that wants to be warden someday.
And that would be you for a second term, apparently.
So I've got a mover. Councillor Stark moves that Warden Marriott chairs the meeting. Is there a seconder on that? Councillor Ferguson. All in favor? That carries. Thank you very much, Warden Marriott. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you for that, Mr. Tifo, and thank you, Mr. Councillor Stark, for having the faith in me to do this, and everybody else. Good morning. So next on the agenda is a presentation from Mr. Pete Barnes. I see. Is he
Yep,
on?
yep.
Oh, there he is. Sorry, Pete.
Yep. No, it's okay.
Welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thanks. Ty, do you want to run up the PowerPoint?
Yep.
So good morning, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Barnes. I'm a partner at BDO, and joining us is Tyler Stuckley, who's an audit senior in our office, and he's worked on a county file for a number of years now. Just a quick update on the status of the audit. Once the drafts are approved, we need to complete some subsequent events work up to today's date. I received back a response to our fraud letter, which I saw was in the agenda today, and then received back our management representation letter, which I sent to Larry and Nancy this morning for signing. So if you want to roll to the agenda, so this shows what we'll be going over. Ty will be going over the highlights from the statements, and then I'm going to go over the final report to those charged with governance in the management letter. So as you'll see when Ty goes through the slides, the county had a strong financial year this year despite the pandemic. So I'll turn it over to you now, Tyler.
Perfect. Thanks, Pete. So just getting started with our review of the financial statements this morning, you can flip with me to page 27 of your agenda package. And on this page, you'll see the independent auditors report. So the independent auditors report is unchanged from the prior year. Looks very much the same as what you're used to from last year. And overall, it details that for the Corporation of the County of Lambton, the accompanying consolidated financial statements present fairly, in all material respects, the financial position of the municipality as at December 31st, 2020, and its consolidated results of operations, its consolidated change in net debt, and its consolidated cash flows for the year then ended in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards. So in short, a clean opinion is provided. You might also notice there's no date on the statements yet. It's just listed as to be determined. So if the statements are approved today, the statements and the independent auditors report will be dated today as well. So this slide here just shows the two main areas I'll be covering today. They can be found on pages 29 and 30 of the agenda package in front of you. And on those pages are the statement of financial position and the statement of operations. This table on this slide shows a 3-year comparison of the financial assets presented on your statement of financial position in the financial statement package. And you'll notice that overall, the municipality is continuing to build its financial asset base year over year. In reviewing this trend, the municipality has increased its asset base by over 30.7 million, or 54% compared with 2018. As you can see, there have been increases in cash and temporary investments and accounts receivable. The increase in accounts receivable is largely due to $542,000 in principal and interest payments made by the county on behalf of Bioindustrial Innovation Canada, and then a 1.16 million receivable balance from the city of Sarnia, which was subsequently received shortly after year end. And finally, the increases in cash are explained on page 32 of your agenda package, which is the cash flow statement. And you'll see that the increase in the cash balance is mainly as a result of the annual surplus generated in the year. Similarly, on this slide, you'll see a 3-year comparison of the financial liabilities presented on your statement of financial position. And you'd notice that overall, the financial liabilities have remained relatively consistent over the 3-year term. You'll also notice that one of the line items is a $16.5 million CDC bankers acceptance. That's included on a separate line in this chart, but when combined with long-term debt, it brings total long-term debt more in line with the prior 2 years, as will be seen on the next slide here. So this slide shows the trend in long-term debt for the corporation of the County of Lambton over the last 5 years. And as you can see, it decreased by over 1.6 million or 4.6% in the current year. On this slide, we just show the expected principal repayments on the county's existing debt. So another 11.5 million of principal is expected to be paid off between 2021 and 2025. And further details of the long-term debt can be found in note 7 of the financial statements on pages 38 and 39 of the agenda package in front of you. This slide here just shows the increase over the last 3 years of the municipality's accumulated surplus balance and the slight increase in the current year for tangible capital assets. So at the end of 2020, the municipality had over 280 million of tangible capital assets on hand and over 302 million in accumulated surplus. Details of the breakdown of the municipality's tangible capital assets can be found in Schedule 1 of the financial statements on pages 51 to 54 of your agenda. And details of the municipality's accumulated surplus can be found in Schedule 2 of the financial statements right after the capital assets schedule on page 55. Moving on to reserves and reserve funds over the last 5 years. On this chart, you can see there was an increase of 29.2 million over the 5 years. And in the current year, approximately 18.2 million was added to the reserves and reserve funds. The table on this slide shows a comparison of budgeted revenues to actual. Actual revenues were 14.9 million or 7.16% higher than budget. Reasoning behind this increase largely relates to the increase that you can see there in provincial government transfers during the year. And these increases came from additional funding being flowed to the municipalities, such as Safe Restart funds, COVID funding, such as pandemic pay, and social services relief funding. This slide here just shows in pie chart format where your revenues are coming from. And of note, over 48% from provincial government transfers, as we mentioned on the last slide, over 35% from taxation revenue, and over 11% from user charges. And similarly, this slide shows a comparison of budgeted expenses by function to actual. And actual expenses were 1.6 million or 0.78% less than budget. And this slide here shows those same expenses, but on a by object basis, which can also be seen in note 11 of the financial statements on page 40 of your agenda package. And overall, many of the cost groupings were either less than or nearly on par with the prior year, which shows good cost control at the municipality year over year. We can see that salaries and benefits have increased fairly significantly over the prior year. And that's due to circumstances of the pandemic, such as increased overtime hours. And again, in pie chart format, a breakdown of where the expenses are coming from. Of note, over 42% comes from salaries, wages, and benefits, over 26% on materials, and over 16% on contributions to other organizations. Just some other highlights to draw your attention to in the financial statements. So note 8 to the financial statements on page 39 talks about the OMERS pension plan. As you can see, the amount contributed to OMERS increased this year to 5.5 million. Note 18 to the statements on page 47 details the municipality's guarantee of the Southwestern Integrated Fiber Technology Incorporated's credit facility in the amount of $2.1 million. And note 19 to the statements on page 48 has the various commitments and agreements of the municipality with various entities for things such as rentals, maintenance for roads, construction projects, and grants. Finally, just to mention some other financial statements, the trust funds for the Residents' Comfort Trust statements, which are reported in separate statements from the main corporation of the County of Lambton financial statements. These statements received an unqualified audit opinion and had total assets and a total fund balance of $90,495. The trust fund numbers are not included in the County of Lambton financial statements, and this is why they have to be presented in a separate statement by themselves. Now I'll pass it back to Pete to discuss the final reports of those charged with governance.
Thanks, Ty. So each year we're required to issue a final report to those charged with governance, which is you as the Audit Committee. It's a follow-up to our planning report, which we issued back in February. A copy of the report's in your package. I think it starts at page 71, and I'll just go over some highlights that we're required to go over with you. So we're required to update our independence, so I can say that we're still independent with respect to the county. We need to disclose if there were any changes in materiality from when we planned the audit. And as you can see from the slide, materiality remained at $4 million. We also need to disclose if there were any unadjusted misstatements that we found. And this year we were pleased to note that there were none. So that was a good job by county staff. And then the management rep letter we already talked about, we need it signed and returned before we can release finals. The last thing we have to talk about is our management letter, which is on page 84 of your package. And page 86, which is appendix 1, highlights the points. And the only points we had this year related to the nursing homes again. So there was one instance where one check only had one authorized signature, and the policy is 2 signatures on checks. At one of the homes, there was a couple instances where copies of the receipts for trust deposits weren't kept. And then the final point relates to documentation surrounding missing power of attorney forms, inconsistencies with point click care, or ones that didn't have the appropriate, signature. And these are similar points that we've had in prior years, but I mean, they're not major issues. They're just things to bring to your attention because they're not following policy. And finally, we just want to thank Larry, Nancy, and their staff for helping us out again this year on another virtual audit. So thanks to them. And now we can take any questions that you might have.
Okay, thanks, Pete and Tyler, for that presentation. And I see we have a question from Brad.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chairman Kevin, and not so much for Peter at this time, but I just wondered in regards to those items on Appendix 1, those 3 items, I would just like maybe that there be some record kept that we refer this to administration for a report back, just to confirm that those corrections will be or have been made for future use. Maybe Stefan could speak to that.
Yep. If I understanding that correctly, you're just moving Councillor Loosely for a report to be presented to County Council on the steps that have been taken to address the items addressed in or listed in Appendix 1.
I would move that, Mr. Chair, just to make sure we do correct those situations and they don't get lost in the shuffle.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that? Mike Stark. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That would be carried. Thank you. Any other questions? Brad.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Kevin. But on the bright side, I do want to thank Mr. Barnes and his team for this presentation. And it's really nice when I looked this over in detail the other day. It's really good news that the county is in such a good financial position. And I also want, Kevin, you to pass on to your staff the good work in staying within our budget. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Brad. I will definitely do that. And yeah, I was quite pleasantly surprised to see our numbers better than I thought they were. So, although I think we know the real problem comes in the next 12 months, possibly when those transfers probably will dwindle. So, but for now, yeah, I guess we got reason to celebrate here. Thanks again for that. And so it's hard to see every.
I have a question.
I've got a question
If we
too,
can
Ken.
return to the main screen.
There we go.
Okay.
Yeah, hard switching back and forth. Who was first there? Mike, go ahead.
Again, I would like to echo Brad's comments with respect to the overall performance, but I think it needs some clarification, at least for me it does. And Tyler, if I could refer to the page 55 with respect to reserves and reserve funds and surpluses. So when I look at the 2019 actual, and I'll go to the total line, the first line, I see roughly a $19 million difference. And I'd like to know, and I believe it is, the fact that the main source of these increased reserve funds is from operations, which in fact, going back to your pie chart, leads you to believe that the donations or the contributions from the province are the genesis of these funds. I just want to make sure that I understand, are the additional revenues coming from the province being flowed through to this reserve account, and therefore that accounts for a $19 million difference? And then suggested by the warden, these funds may in fact end up being used in 2021. I'd like your comment on that.
Is that more a question for Larry?
Larry, maybe more for Larry.
Sure, I can pipe in on that if you'd like. Through the chair, Councillor Stark, good observation. The increase in reserves and reserve funds, a significant component is because of the timing of the inflow of provincial grants that we received during the pandemic. As you know, we continue to try to improve our reserve fund levels for our amortization reserve and dealing with our tangible capital assets and so forth. But by far, the significant increase is basically the inflows of the Safe Restart funding, the social services relief fund, pandemic funding and so forth, that we basically put into reserves because we knew the expenses were going to happen in future years.
So as a follow-up, would it be fair to say then you suggest future years? I'm wondering if that usage would occur in 2021, 22, or is it difficult to predict?
Right now, I would say 21 and 22 is our best guesstimate at this point in time. There's still some, especially on the homelessness side, as to whether we're going to get confirmed funding for some of our initiatives beyond September, October 2021. So, that is that's financing that's there for the future period.
Thank you. And finally, my final question is for the auditors, and I'd like an independent view from them. I've asked this of other auditors on other committees or on other organizations that I belong to. And my question is, how do we stack up in terms of reserves relative to our competitors, whether that be the County of Huron or Essex, Kent? How do our reserve balances compare to our brethren?
So I don't have that at my fingertips right here. I'd have to look that up and see, compare their financial statements to yours. But I can go online and try and find their statements and look that up for you.
All I'm looking for is whether we compare favorably or not. And as you know, when you're evaluating a company, you're looking at all of the components. And this to me is a critical component, and one that I've shared with Mr. Pacheco, that our reserves have been below what the comparisons have been. So by way of this chart, I assume we have dramatically increased our comparative position. And I would appreciate a follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stark. Councillor Cook is next, and then Councillor Loosely.
Thank you, Chair. I guess this would be maybe through to, I don't know which one, a little more information on the banker's acceptance, the $16 million line there. What's the repayment on that? I know we've got a pretty good interest rate on it, but what's the repayment for that? And is that factored into the annual repayments that we have right now?
Larry or Nancy, do you want to take that one?
Nancy, do you want to try to take a stab at that one, or oh, she's there?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, okay, the banker's acceptance actually relates to the County of Lambton Community Development Corporation because we do consolidation with them. This relates to that organization. It was really a very short-term held banker's acceptance while we were refinancing the debt for that organization. So probably the second half of 2020, it got converted back to a bank loan for the CDC.
So just the follow-up then, what's the repayment on that? Is that included in what our payments are now going forward for 21 to 25?
Not on the chart that we presented. It's just for the long-term debt.
Okay.
We haven't done, the CDC's year end is different than the county's year end.
Okay.
April 30th, 2021.
So it's coming from a separate fund then to pay that $16 million then?
Yes, it's the CDC that's responsible for that.
Okay. And the county was just kind of the placeholder until they got that restructured then?
No, the banker's acceptance belonged to the CDC, but because we had to consolidate the CDC in with the county line by line, that's why it's showing up on our statements this year, because it's something new.
Okay.
Are we okay there, Councillor Cook?
Well, I guess I'm just trying to figure out, because it was 34 million the year before, and we're showing the same dollar amounts as debt, but we're showing a different restructuring. So I'm just trying to figure out whether if that 16 was included in the previous years or not, because the dollar amounts seem to be changed. I don't think we paid down $16 million in debt last year. I don't think we did to convert this to banker's acceptance. I'm not sure how the statements are reflecting that.
It was reported as long-term debt the prior year for CDC. It just got, when we were refinancing, the bank converted it to a banker's acceptance for a short period of time while they got the bank loan in place.
Okay.
Reestablished.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so we got Councillor Loosely and then Councillor Stark.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Kevin. I just want to go back to Mr. Stark and for Mr. Barnes. If we're going to start comparing reserve funds, just make sure you look at the actual budgets, not just the counties or the regions. So you'll have to, compare the total budgets to what we have to see what their reserves are, and not just get it from some of the larger ones. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stark, please.
Going back to Councillor Cook's comments, I really, that was a question mark for me as well, given the fact that, and I could be corrected on this, we did a debt forgiveness of $5 million. I had $4.9 million for that organization. And where does that show up in terms of the long-term debt?
So the long-term debt would be extinguished between the county and the CDC.
Agreed. So the question then, going back to Councillor Cook's comment, is how is the balance of the debt going to be repaid? I think that's what he was trying to get to, and that's what I'd like to get to.
Maybe I can pipe in here just to try to simplify it. I think basically what's happened from prior years to this year is just a reclassification of debt. Debt is debt. Basically, long-term debt or banker's acceptance is debt. The debt payments that you've seen are on the charts are highlighted as to what the county's commitments are on existing debt, which includes the banker's acceptance debt, which basically says, we're not, there's another institution that is, or another party that's responsible for that banker's acceptance. So the one point I want to point out on our debt payments is our obligations are an existing debt. It has nothing to do with basically any future capital planning that we may have in place in the future with respect to a renewable 10-year asset management plan. That's just on these are our existing debt obligations. And as was highlighted, the statements are presented with the greatest openness and transparency and fairness as well. On just one thing on the reserve fund piece, because I know that there was some discussion on that. When we got our credit rating by S&P, just to reiterate, our reserve fund levels are low in comparison to our peers. The one positive component is we are improving because we've taken some action in trying to improve our reserve fund levels, noting that we have some significant future capital expenditures that we have to manage. Without appropriate reserves and reserve fund, in your financial toolkit becomes very, very limited as how you could potentially finance these capital initiatives. Hopefully that helps.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Palarchio. Any other questions? Councillor Ferguson.
Just an overall information question I have. When I look at revenue and provincial transfer brings in revenue and our taxation, when we do property taxes and I pay it on my property, it goes to the county, does some get forwarded to the province and it goes back and transferred, or the provincial transfer out of, say, an income tax or an HST, basically, that would come back to us?
I'd like to take that question offline if possible through Councillor Ferguson. I'm just not sure I understood what the question was, but if we can do that, I'd be happy to talk to the council.
Okay, no, that's fine. It's just an odd question. I just want to know where the money, anyway, we can do that offline. Yep. It's not to balance the books, it was just a curiosity question.
Okay. If that's agreeable to the committee, then we'll let that be handled off after the meeting. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, seeing none. Item number 4 is the review of the auditor's correspondence and the draft response letter. I guess we have those. Do we need anything presented, or do we just review these now?
Is this the fraud letter? We just need, I guess, approval of the letter to come to us is the, I think is what we're looking for.
So is Councillor Cook?
Is it just to receive? I'll move it. If it's just to receive the letters, is that what it looks like we're doing? Receive and review? I'm not sure exactly what if there's a recommendation, but.
Yeah, the recommendations are at the end there. Procedurally wise, Mr. Tifo, how would you like? Would you like a motion here to receive these, or do we do all at the end?
Yeah, there's a letter here, a draft letter, I think it dated June 24th, 2021, responding to the questions about fraud. We just need instructions from the committee to authorize the warden to sign that off and send it into BDO.
Okay, I'll make that motion.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Cook, seconded by Councillor Loosely. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Let's see here. Sorry, bear with me. There we are. We're back to my agenda. Number 5 is the consolidated financial statements. So I guess, Mr. Tifo, we entertain a motion for these as well.
Yeah, you can entertain a motion if you want a brief presentation on each. It's really up to the committee to define its path forward. If you want some brief commentary on each, you can ask for that and then just pass a receive and file resolution.
Okay, any questions on those statements from the committee? Councillor Loosely.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'd move that this be received and filed.
Okay, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Cook. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you.
Okay, at this point in time, I think we've done 5A, B, and C, correct? We just received and filed that?
Yes, that's correct.
Sounds good. So at this point in time, we'll ask Lisa to confirm that we're